Hi, today I'm here with Bobbi Rebell, a certified financial planner and host of the Money Tips for Financial Grownups podcast. She also has a new book coming out in March, Launching Financial Grownups, Live Your Richest Life by Helping Your Almost Adult Kids Become Everyday Money Smart. Bobbi's also an entrepreneur. Her store, grownupgear.com, includes leisurewear, hats, mugs, and even baby products like bibs and onesies that make great gifts. Prior to being an author and CEO of her own company, Bobbi was a global business news television anchor and personal finance columnist at Thomson Reuters for 16 years. She also previously worked at CNBC, CNN, and PBS Nightly Business Report. How are you doing today, Bobbi?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. This is really fun.
Hey, my pleasure. Can we kick off a little bit about your background? Why did you choose to leave your reporting career?
So I loved being a journalist, and I still, in many ways, am a journalist because I'm writing books and so on. But I did it for many years, and I felt that I had interviewed so many CEOs and I did so much reporting on really business topics, things like earnings, things like economic indicators, and talking, as I mentioned, with CEOs and business leaders. And that was all great. But I wanted to give something back to people that wanted to actually know what to do with their money because the truth is, I don't know that people should trade based on the jobs report. I don't know that people should make their big financial decisions based on the news of the day. I think that they should know big picture what their goals are and work backwards from there. So I wrote my first book, which is How to Be a Financial Grown Up, which is really targeted towards young people. And then I became a certified financial planner because after writing the book, I was being invited to go all these places and speak primarily to people that were targets of the book, the target audience, people in their 20s. And I felt very much sort of unqualified as just a journalist because I had interviewed people, but I didn't necessarily have the answers myself. And when you go give a speech, you can't really say, well, I interviewed this guy, so you should go call Kevin O'Leary because he gave me a great interview for the book. And that's not realistic. So I had to learn the answers myself. So I became a certified financial planner, which is really hard. I cried. I kid you not. I cried during the test. It was so hard, but I passed it, which is still shocking to me. I think that's one of my biggest life accomplishments, getting into college, that kind of thing. But it was worth it because now I have that qualification and that validation that I do know what I'm talking about. And to even keep up with that credential, I have to do continuing education and ethics training. And I'm very proud of it. I think there's a lot of financial experts out there. And for those just listening to audio, I'm making little quotation marks because so many people call themselves financial experts. But in fact, it's really important to understand why. Is it just because they said so? Is it because they paid off $20,000 of student debt, which is huge and wonderful? But that doesn't mean that they are a financial expert for what you need. If you want to pay off $20,000 of student debt, it would be great to listen to how they did it. Absolutely. But they may not be the expert for your estate planning or as you talk to people about marketing, things like that. So know the qualifications of the person that you're talking to. And for me, like I said, I wanted that validation and I wanted that comfort that I was actually going to give people accurate information. So it forces me to keep up with what's going on in the various areas that they focus with the certified financial planners. There's actually 6 areas of focus, but I won't bore everyone with that. But they make us work for it. They definitely keep on us. If you're a CFP, you have to stay on top of the news and
Yeah.
changes that are relevant to clients.
I like how you found this area you're passionate about, but then brought your other skills with you on the media industry, and how you sort of brought that ability to interview and then create content and really develop that subject matter expertise in this area.
Thank you so much. Well, you've done the same. So
That's the game plan. Well, let's jump into the top three principles to your success.
So my number one principle for success is to be prepared. Do the research and the prep work so you stand out from your peers. There are so many interviews that I've done where they compliment me. Wow, you actually prepared for this. Wow, you actually are making an effort. However, I don't want to say something derogatory to other people, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't bother to do their homework, to be well prepared for whatever it may be. For example, if I am doing an interview where I've been hired to host an interview for a brand, because I do work with brands that I believe in, I will research the person that I'm interviewing, not just on the topic, but I will also sometimes research where they went to school. I mean, I'm looking for common bonds for small talk so I can make that person that much more comfortable when we're getting ready for the interview. Go that extra step, know who you're talking to, and understand what matters to them. So be prepared, do the homework, do the research, whatever it may be for any project you're doing. That goes for school and it goes for work. So the second one is listen to the needs of your client or your boss or whomever it is that you are doing a task for or project with. make sure that you understand the actual assignment, that you don't just do what you think the assignment should be. Now, this is great for kids in school. I do this with my 8th grader all the time. He will write a wonderful homework assignment, but it doesn't actually answer the question that the teacher asked. And also in school, it might say this answer must be 4 to 5 sentences. It doesn't say 2, it doesn't say 8. And it's important that more is not always more. So for example, in a school assignment that says we want this to be 4 or 5 sentences, certainly you don't want to be less. That's obvious, right? Because that looks lazy. You didn't complete the assignment. But what if you're 8 sentences, 9 sentences? Well, unless that teacher has said more is more, I love that. It's also a skill to write concisely. And the teacher might be looking for the student to write the essay, whatever it may be, in only 5 sentences, which is also challenging. I remember when I started out reporting, I would try to explain to people that my 2-minute report as a TV reporter was in fact very time consuming. And I did work more than 2 minutes a day. My mother never really understood that, but it's very hard to communicate a point in fewer words. People don't give writers of newspapers that have very limited space a lot of credit. I remember talking to somebody from, I think it was the New York Post, maybe it was USA Today. Those are newspapers that have very concise space, very little space for a story. And it is very hard to write and communicate a point very clearly in less time. When you have all the time in the world and all the space, it's really easy. You don't have to really edit yourself. You don't have to be so precise. I wrote for CNN for an anchor now at Fox. His name is Lou Dobbs. But when I was at CNN, I wrote for the evening anchor, and I would have the whole day to write a 45-second segment, and it had to include 4 stocks, and it had to convey the news and why it mattered of those 4 stocks in 45 seconds. It's really challenging to do that. And I had all day to do it because every word had to be justified. It's not easy. Okay, the third principle is to follow up and send thank you notes and gifts. So I really try to do that with my guests on the podcast, or if somebody did an interview with me for my upcoming book, they actually would get something from grownupgear.com. Not the really early ones, because I didn't have grownupgear.com. So if you're hearing this, I'm sorry. But if you write to me, I'll send you a gift. But for grownupgear.com, it's great marketing, but also it sends a nice message. Thank you so much for gifting me this time. And really, you're validating my podcast to be on it. And I appreciate it. So I would send them a gift from my grownupgear.com line. And I think that's worth a lot. And you get a lot of thank yous and you're remembered. And yes, it's a cost, but I think that's a really good cost. I know for my first book, I didn't have grownupgear.com, but I would send them personalized treats from a place called Treat House. And it's little Rice Krispie treats. And what I would do is I would take a graphic and I'd put so let's say Kevin O'Leary that I mentioned earlier, he was in my first book, and I would make the graphic and I would send it to Treat House and they would put it on the treats. So then you have Kevin O'Leary got this and would take a picture and send me the picture and thank you and maybe share it on social media. So it was really fun and they got a kick out of it. And it was really personal because it had their picture on it with my branding on this thank you treat. And I think it made a memorable impression.
That's clever. I want to make sure I got these right. We have number 1, be prepared. Number 2 is listen or also be concise.
Well, be concise was an example of listening because you're following the directions. So if the directions are to complete an assignment in 4 to 5 sentences, then you have to only do it in 4 to 5 sentences, and don't assume that more is more. Don't assume that 8 sentences completes the assignment correctly. It doesn't. The teacher said 4 to 5 sentences. So another example would be if you were a writer and you were asked to write a 500-word article, and you can ask, it can be between 525 and 475. Okay, fine. But if you turn in a 1,000-word article, they're going to reject it.
Okay.
Following the assignment. So you have to listen to what people actually want and do what you're asked to do. Not, you might think, oh, it's going to be better if it's 1,000 words. I'm going to do more work and they're going to be happier. Well, no, because that's not what they asked for. So you have to really listen to what the client or whoever wants.
The struggle of our
time.
Does
that make sense?
Yeah. It's our struggle of time today is keeping attention.
Yeah.
Listening. And the third one was follow-ups. This is where it gets fun. We're going to turn them into some practical how-tos.
Okay.
Just thinking of how do we turn this into a practice that we can adopt on a daily basis. And the one, be prepared. Even imagining you're that person that isn't prepared. You tend to show up to things. How do we turn that nature of being prepared into a practical how-to?
I would make an appointment, not just for the event that you're going to, but also to designate time to actually prepare. So today, you and I have not met before. Your team was gracious and reached out to me, but I wasn't familiar with your work. So I had it blocked on my calendar at about 4 o'clock today. We were talking at 6:30 Eastern time that I would go and listen to several of your podcasts, as many as possible, that I would go look at them both on camera, because you record it on camera, and also how it appears in different podcast monitors. And I would listen. And so I would understand what kind of questions, what I should expect. And in fact, I should have expected, because we always say, let's go into each of those principles more. That's your format. So I kind of would know what to expect, and I would feel more comfortable going through it. So I do that myself. Is I also book an event, but I book a preparation for the event. So you need to actually build in the time. So if I have a client and I'm going to be moderating a panel, I don't just show up. First of all, I'll usually tell them I would like to do a rehearsal where I go over, make sure everyone's comfortable. But even before that, I'm going to go and research who is going to be on the panel that I'm going to moderate. What is their angle? Why are they there? Are they employees of the company? Are they people that were also hired to be part of this panel? What are they going to want to talk about? And so on. And so I think that's important to always build in the extra time to be prepared as part of what you're doing. It's not an added thing. It's part of it.
Yeah, I like that. You got to definitely allocate the time to do it and then do the research, do the homework.
I was just going to add that this is really important when you price your time. If you're a consultant or you're working with somebody and you get paid by the hour. And I do work with a wonderful agent, but sometimes people say, well, you're doing this web thing with us. And because a lot of things are web-based now because of COVID, although hopefully I'll do more speaking in person, but they're web things. So they'll say, well, this is just, a 20-minute little segment. It's not a big deal. It's like, well, we have to explain to them, no, it's not 20 minutes. It's time to prepare, even just technically for those 20 minutes, right? To get set up, because we're talking today, but I didn't sit down exactly when the interview started. I was setting up half an hour before. And it's also time to prepare, time to make sure you understand. So all that stuff has to be built in when you are pitching a client or when you're giving somebody an estimate of what a project would cost, a proposal. So when you prepare a proposal, it's important that you tell them that you will also be preparing for it.
Right.
And
right.
that time is time that has to be compensated. So you should be compensated for that time. And it's important that you price that accordingly, or you won't have a good business. Right? No, it's true.
Yeah. And there's an element of time management that underpins all of this, that you need to manage your time to make sure you prepare for these important events, as well as manage the whole picture of things and what you're doing and the value you're delivering.
Absolutely.
So I like it. I'm trying to think on be prepared, putting in the time, doing the research, anything else that falls along the line.
I mean, I would really put it on your calendar. Book a time. Book a time with yourself. And I would also really guard your time, because otherwise people will creep up on your calendar. So when you book the event, book the preparation time and block the calendar, because otherwise it won't happen.
Yeah, you need to value the preparation time as much as the actual event.
More.
Yep.
It's more important to be prepared. And it also, the truth is, when you're prepared, you're going to be less nervous, and things do go wrong. I've been speaking to groups of 500, sometimes as much as 1,000 people, and the teleprompter goes down. But if you've reviewed your notes and you understand that the goal of this speech is to get from A to B, you're going to be able to wing it until the teleprompters come back on, in my case, right? If you're prepared, nothing's going to throw you.
Right. Yeah, no, totally agree. I had a similar example you gave earlier. I had a big interview, but doing all the research ahead of time allowed me to understand the person's personality and build rapport a lot quicker in the interview. And everything just turned out a lot smoother. Let's get into listening. Now, this is a fun one because this probably comes up on a lot of people's top principles list. Probably the harder one to define, and how do you turn that into a practical how-to, especially in our evolving generation where it gets more and more challenging.
This is really challenging, and this has been something that has been challenging for me. But one of the pitfalls that reporters make that I worked really hard not to do is that you're so busy thinking of your next question that you don't always hear the answer, and then you don't follow up appropriately. So I think everyone should sort of pretend they're a reporter where they're listening to a potential client and really listen to what they're saying rather than thinking of their next pitch or the next thing they're going to say. Listen. And it's okay for there to be a beat where you think and process what they're saying, because by doing that, they're going to know that you're really listening to their needs. And really, we all want to have someone who will listen to us and solve whatever problem we need solved. So for example, the problem that my next book is going to solve is, for parents, how do we get our children basically off the payroll, but in a loving way? Because Gen X parents like myself, we don't really want to just cut our kids off, right? We want to maintain a strong relationship with them. We want them to have it easier than we did. We want them to be successful. We want them to be independent, but we aren't going to just cut them off. We want it to be very gentle. So I really listened to so many people when I was writing the book that is the problem they want solved. Not that they want to just throw money at their kids, not that they want to cut them off, that they want to find a way to maintain ties and in a sustainable and loving way, help their young adult children be financially independent of them while still letting them follow their passion and feel like they're doing what they want to do in life. So it's a nuanced approach, but that's what I saw as the problem to be solved. So when you're thinking about who you want to be speaking to, think about really listening to what their needs are, and then can you fill that need? You might not be able to, but it's really important to listen and let them know that you are listening. By often, it's a little cheesy, but there's all these techniques out there, like repeat back what they said.
Yep.
Oh, I hear what you're saying. This is what's bothering you. It's bothering you that you don't want to be harsh. You don't want your kids to hate you. You don't want to just come in and cut them off one day, but you don't know how to do that. That's what you want to find a way to do that, but you don't want them to feel entitled to your money. You want them to earn their own money, but you want them to decide to do it themselves without you telling them that. So it's a little bit tricky and it's hard. I've had a hard time gaining that skill myself. I'm still working on it, but take the time to process what they're saying to you.
I like that. Take the time, keep in the conversation, stay focused on what they're saying. I think you had a really good example of the area you decided to focus on and essentially the problem to solve, but the way you went about it and spoke to others ahead of time and really listened to understand the problem in a deeper way that allows you to actually articulate it so well that when you explain it, "Hey, this is the problem I'm solving," so that there's such valuable information by having good listening skills that you acquire that you then in turn utilize to drive your success, that say, hey, I can talk about this problem better, which essentially makes you more knowledgeable about the problem and better qualified to solve it.
Very well said. Yes,
That's what I
I would
got
agree
out
with
of
all
it.
of that. Yes.
So powerful, powerful thing. What about, I feel like listening lends to empathy in some ways. I don't know if you have thoughts around that, because it's like creating this next depth of listening is to understand the person feels and why they feel that way. I don't know if that sort of comes up in some elements when you think about listening.
I think it absolutely does. I mean, empathy drives so much in our lives. And the fact is, if we can connect with people on an emotional level, we're going to be more successful. But it's not just about success. You're just going to be happier because you're going to feel like the people that you do business with are your friends also. And sometimes it's hard to distinguish who are your business associates and who are your friends. But I'm not sure that's such a bad thing. We shouldn't always have such a specific line. It's okay to blur the lines. I think that we can make wonderful friendships through business and through work and through clients. And that's not necessarily something to be shied away from. And by having that personal connection through empathy, you can really do that.
That's very true. That's a good way to look at it, is it develops depth in your relationships that, yeah, allows you to build relationships on both fronts, professionally, personally.
Yeah. And a lot of people, as you go through life and you get older, a lot of people are both. They're good friends. And they also are people that you have a lot of common themes in your business that you can sort of collaborate and refer each other to different things and support each other.
Now, if we have the person that really, really struggles with super short attention span, something I grew up with myself, is there anything you found around that to stay on track? I like the let's not get distracted on thoughts running across my mind. Is it like a muscle you have to just sit there and condition yourself till you can develop it? Or are there some other hacks that you've encountered?
So I am not a doctor, but there are people, first of all, that actually have real attention issues. I do want to just make a note because I do have family members that have ADHD. And if you do feel that you are it's just so hard for you to focus, it might be worth consulting a medical professional. And I rarely have said that in an interview, but I think it's important not to be too hard on ourselves because you may have something going on that can be helped by a medical professional. There are definitely people that have ADD and ADHD and don't realize it until they're adults, and they can be helped by medicine or whatever might be appropriate for them. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to turn off distractions. So before we started filming, it's actually called focus mode on my MacBook. It's basically a do not disturb. It looks like a little half moon. If anyone has a MacBook, go into your settings and find it and put it permanently on the top bar of your computer. And you can do that. One hack that I have done, besides just trying to turn off everything and tell my husband I am doing writing for the next hour because I had to write this book over the past few months, was I did something, and I have no affiliation with this company, but I did something called Cave Day, which is, and again, no affiliation, but it's caveday.org. And you pay, and I did it for a few months while I was writing my book, You pay them, and then you can schedule a cave. And it's a group of maybe sometimes as much as 100 people that you go on for a 1 hour session or as much as a 3 hour session. And you do focused work. And you would say what you were, they would break you into small groups for 45 seconds. And you would say what your intention was for that segment. Maybe it's an hour. And some people might be like, I'm going to work on going through my emails because I can't seem to get through them. For me, I was working on my book, I was writing. And different things. They might be, I'm working on writing a letter to a client. I'm working on my billing and my admin today. And you would go into small groups and say this, and then they would do like a group high five. And then everyone keeps their camera on and you're accountable. And then they come back after like 55 minutes, they play like a little jazz music and they say, okay, we can take a bio break for 5 minutes. And then everyone come back here and you'll do a stretch. And then you go into the next hour. So that's a hack. There's a bunch of different services, I think, that do that. But I did that while I was writing my book and it was really helpful. And also by paying money, I felt very accountable. I was paying money.
You're adding elements of accountability there. I'm thinking of another example, maybe relatable, is watching your recordings. Like this podcast, for example, I used to use so many filler words, but then I would force myself to listen to them to the point where it helped me break that habit rather quickly.
Oh, absolutely. That's a really good thing. And also we all have little quirky things that we do on camera, which I'm doing right now. I'm doing the looking off camera thing, which I do, which I hate. But anyway, accountability. Yeah. Whatever works for you.
Hold yourself accountable to better listener. Let's get into follow-ups. This is a fun one, actually, because you gave some really cool examples of, it's a follow-up, but you took it beyond just a follow-up. You made it a statement. And I'd love to walk through, how do we turn this into a pragmatic approach?
Well, I think it's really pragmatic, and this is so easy, is to take out some stationery. You might have custom stationery with your name on it. It's very nice on strong paper, but you can also just go to the store and buy stationery that maybe has your first initial on it. And that's going to be extremely affordable. And write a handwritten note. And I cannot tell you, there are people that I interviewed for my book that wrote me handwritten notes, or that I've interviewed on my podcast and they write me handwritten notes. And it has such an impact to get a piece of mail that this person wrote for me directly. That is so wonderful and so thoughtful and so rare these days and so easy. And yet it is rare. I don't do it as much as I should. I tend to send gifts which have the printed note. But if you're looking for a more budget-friendly option, what gets better than that?
I like that. You're absolutely right. You get so flattered when you see that, oh, this person actually did something. It's natural. It's creative.
Yeah. And there's somebody that I interviewed a while ago. I think his name is Jason Harris. He works in advertising, and he did actually send me a physical present after we did our interview. But he said what he does is he sets up one day a year and he does personalized birthday notes for every employee in his company for the year. He gives them to an assistant to just mail at the right time, but he literally does it one day a year for probably a couple hundred people. And he sits there and he writes a personal note to each of them, thanking them for their work at the company and maybe saying something personal if he knows them. And because he does it in that organized, focused way, it's not like he's constantly writing a thank you note every day, but how wonderful is it for each employee to get a note from the CEO on their birthday, or maybe it's their work anniversary, something like that. But he does it that way. If you have that kind of thing, you can just do it once a month. You do thank you notes. And again, it goes back to the calendar. You block a 3-hour block and just write your thank you notes or whatever it may be. You talk about the fact that you follow up with people quarterly. Do something like that. Write a note quarterly. You don't have to even reach out and call them. You can just send them a note saying, I saw your latest project doing X, Y, and Z, which you can easily find on LinkedIn or whatever, and just give them a note saying, this really resonated with me. Thank you so much. Be in touch. And they're not going to get that many other notes.
Absolutely true. Make it personal, be creative. This goes in a lot of different ways. You would apply this approach when you're trying to get a job, when anything, working with customers.
I'm glad you brought that up. So this is really important. There's a great book by, it's called The Long Game. It's by Dory Clark. It just came out recently, The Long Game. I'm pushing somebody else's book because it's that good. And what she says is that it's really important that when you make a contact, you not have to have an ask for a very long time, maybe a year. So you might meet somebody and they might be a great contact for something you're working on right then, but be really careful because some people have the attitude, oh, what's the worst thing that could happen? They could just say no. Well, no, because you've burned a potential friendship and everything. As I said, there's a real blurred line between business and friendship these days. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but you have to be very careful with how you treat them. You have to be really considerate that this is somebody that's new in your life. So be appropriate when you meet somebody new and don't be asking for things right away.
Keep away from transactional type of framing of your relationship.
Yeah, just take your time. You take your time, 5 or 6 years, get to know someone.
Absolutely.
I mean, honestly, I have a lot of friends that have potential things they could do for me for business, but I just don't. And when it's the right time, I'll make an ask. But until that time, they're my friends and that's it.
Yeah, even in professional context, you're better off understanding their goals, what they're trying to achieve, and finding ways to support that as opposed to pushing your agenda.
Oh, yeah. You should be very careful. People see through that very quickly. When people reach out to me and have an agenda, I think it's pretty obvious very quickly.
Great tips. What's the best mistake you've ever made?
Okay, I want to rephrase this. So this goes to my preparation. At first, I said, I don't have an answer for this, but I did think about it. And it was not a mistake, but there was a decision I made, a business decision that did not pan out about 2 years ago. And it was not a mistake. It was something that did not line up with my overall business direction. And because it was not, my hope was that it would be complementary, but it was not. It was not additive. It was a tangent, which was complicated. But effectively, one of my favorite podcasters, a gentleman named 𝐁𝐨𝐬𝐬𝐈, who hosts the Stacking Benjamin show, approached me about working on a podcast with him. Here's the tricky thing. The podcast we did was very successful. We were making money. We got a deal with Westwood One. The problem is that it was 6 days a week and it just took too much time. We both had book deals. We both had our primary podcast. I wanted to start Grown Up Gear. He had another project he wanted to start. And a 6-day-a-week podcast was not compatible with the rest of our business. And the way it was structured, we really couldn't offload it to someone else. Now, maybe we'll sell the name at some point. Right now it's on hiatus, but we just couldn't get done other business priorities while doing a 6-day-a-week podcast, even though, as I said, it was really successful. And in fact, it had more listeners than my podcast. But my podcast builds my brand and is in alignment with my other projects. This was called Money with Friends, and it was just such a great show. It was so much fun. We did it live on camera with guest co-hosts and audience participation on Facebook, on YouTube. I mean, it was awesome. We had so much interaction with people. We did the whole thing live, literally with the people watching being called out in the show.
Wow.
So fun. I miss it so much, you can tell, but it was just too much time. And it wasn't the kind of thing where you can make it, there's nothing you can do to make it more efficient when you have to be on camera all those days. And we were doing news-driven stories, so we couldn't pre-tape that much. I'm very sad. I don't want to call it a mistake, but it was a business decision that did not make sense in my business universe. Things have to be aligned. So Grown Up Gear, for example, is merchandise that has the grown-up theme. So it makes sense because someone might buy my book and then want to give it as a gift, and they want to give like a cute bib, and like a bib that we just designed today that I'm so excited. Hopefully I think it'll be up by the time this goes out. It says, I can't believe you're the grown up either. On like a baby bib, get it?
Yeah.
It's all about grown up. Yeah. It's like, it just makes me smile. I really love the grown up gear stuff. I really wanted to be doing that. I think it's a really fun thing. And hopefully when I give speeches, as the world starts to open up, that's something where people that hire me to give a speech can buy a book, and they can also make a tote bag, which has the book and maybe has a sweatshirt that says choose generosity, which is a big theme, because I think people that have money should be generous. So it's a takeoff on, choose kindness, choose generosity, that people should be proactive and choose to be generous with their money. A lot of people really like that stuff, the choose generosity stuff. That might be a nice thing, especially if I speak at a nonprofit, for them to give to the donors. So it makes sense, versus the podcast was awesome, but it didn't necessarily line up with my business goals, even though it was actually more successful than my podcast that I am still doing.
You discovered your capacity and long-term goals and aligned yourself with it.
Yes. Thank you for that. I appreciate the coaching. That's very, very astute of you. I could have said that a lot more succinctly.
And apply one of the techniques of repeating
exactly.
That you told me.
Very well done.
You've got a nice business right now. I love how you've developed your personal brand. I'm a big fan of the approach that you took. It reminds me of the book Content Inc., where you're really focused on becoming a subject matter expert in an area, building your brand and community around it, and then from there being able to provide the solutions. Any thoughts? I'm just curious if you'd share to other sort of aspiring, whether it's entrepreneurs or next gen leaders.
I would say not to be in too much of a rush, because you'll discover a lot along the way. So take your time. I think that a lot of young people want instant success. And this is not to say they shouldn't be ambitious and put in the work and all the things that we talked about, but just chill. A lot of people coming into the workforce think that it's good to just rise so fast, but sometimes it's good to listen to the people that have been there even a year ahead of you. It doesn't have to be the 50-year-old big boss, but just listen a lot while you're at the office before you jump in with all of your opinions, because you may have better opinions once you're better informed. So take your time. I also think that, with some exceptions, be a little choosy when you do job hopping. Don't always just job hop for $5,000. Maybe talk to your boss and say, look, they're offering me this, but I really want to have continuity here. And what can I expect here? And that kind of thing. And just be a little bit cooler about things. Don't be so overly eager to keep jumping so fast. Just take your time and really enjoy the ride also while you're there, and listen to the people that want to give you advice. And part of that is try to go into the office. I know COVID is still a thing, but when it's available, be the only person in the office. And so then when the boss walks in, you're the person there. And not because they're going to see you putting in FaceTime, just the opposite, because you can sit down with them and you can learn what matters to the boss. What are the metrics that really matter to get ahead wherever you're working? And what is he looking for or she looking for in the next generation of leaders? So pay attention to that. And if you're the person that's there, you're the person they're going to have coffee with, or whatever it may be.
Some great bonus advice. Just to wrap things up, Bobbi, thank you so much for taking the time. I enjoyed our conversation today. For those listening that want to keep up with you, what are some good avenues to follow you?
Well, the best place to go is just my website, which is my name, Bobbi Rebell. So you go to BOBBIREBELL.com. That'll get you everywhere. You can also check out Grown Up Gear at grownupgear.com. And please listen to my podcast, Money Tips for Financial Grownups. And yeah, follow me on the socials, Bobbi Rebell and the number one, Bobbi Rebell 1 on Instagram. And I'm also on Twitter at Bobbi Rebell. So thank you. And thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks, Bobbi. Enjoyed this conversation.